This is another edition of the CFF Sites Preseason Preview Series. My name is Joe DeSalvo. I am joined by my partner, Mike Bainbridge. And in this show, Mike, we're going to be talking about Sleepers 2.0. It seems like there's a lot of, people love the Sleepers players that, we were buying, players that we're fading. But the reason why we're doing this is because as the summer gets a little long in the tooth and preseason camps start up, we start getting a little bit more tidbits here and there. And what that means is sometimes we start favoring certain players. Maybe we start getting off of certain players. So, these little short sleeper segments, they just kind of change, right? And we're going to do them maybe for another week or so as we inch a little bit closer to kickoff. There seems to be a longing for them. So we're going to throw out 10 more names for everybody today.
Yeah, just some players that have been under discussed maybe over the offseason, and some guys that are maybe popping up here in the first week or two of fall camp.
Yep, sounds good. But before we get it started, man, this is going to be something that you're going to like. A listener of the show, he frequents the YouTube channels, always leaving us good comments on there. He sent us something in the mail, man. He sent me something in the mail. It came in here late last week. It said, "Hey Joe, love the CFF site and the YouTube channel. No helmet wall is complete without the best football helmet of all time. I'm talking, of course, about the University of Michigan's famous winged helmet. Go Blue from Andrew Brack." So there you go, Mike Bainbridge, for you, my man. Look at that.
Man, you need a couple more to get the whole state of Michigan up there, and what, Alabama too.
Well, that's true. We've got two states up there. And also, while I'm saying that, look, I do have the address at the bottom, the office address at the bottom of the website's homepage. If anybody wants to surprise us and support us with one of their helmets, give us, we'll read your letter on the air, help us add to the shelf. But in the process, I've got in touch with somebody at Collectible Supplies, and they specialize in sport gifts, collectibles, mini helmets, and they're going to work with us to populate this back wall here. So they're going to really help us out. So we've kind of developed a partnership with them. So if you're looking for some helmets, mini helmets, any type of sports collectibles, gifts, go check them out. It's in the partnership section in the homepage of the website. Give them a shout, give them a try, go visit, but support them. Collectible Supplies, and go check it out, man. So that's it. That's our new sponsorship take of the show, man. But let's get into it. Let's go. Sleepers 2.0. Where do we want to start? Who do you want to start with? Who's a player now that you're kind of you're liking a little bit more right now, maybe getting late in the draft?
Yeah, I think this one's timely, and this one actually could blow up in my face. I don't know if you noticed today on so today's August 7th. We're recording this. Derek McFall and Adam Randall lost their wide receiver eligibility on Fantrax. So this player that I'm going to say right here, KJ Duff with Rutgers, this could obviously end up blowing him up in my face because he has I looked, he still has wide receiver and tight end eligibility, and I think that tight end eligibility is obviously crucial to him actually being a sleeper this year in college fantasy. This was a guy, he was third on the depth chart last year, third in targets and receptions, behind Dymere Miller and Ian Strong. We all kind of agree that Ian Strong is solidified as the wide receiver one this year, but there's still over 150 targets there that are vacated from last year. They brought in DT Sheffield over the offseason. He'll start in the slot, so Duff will start opposite Ian Strong. But, are we 100% sure? And this is how we haven't projected DT Sheffield as wide receiver two as it's currently constructed, but are we absolutely certain that that's kind of how it's going to go, where Duff is the third option? So, if he retains that tight end eligibility, if you put his current projection now with the tight ends, that's a top 25 tight end. So, and he's getting some pub here in fall camp. So it's just a guy, if he maintains that dual designation on Fantrax, he could be a real help to your lineups at tight end.
He's somebody that we just spoke about not that long ago when we were talking about position eligibility, knowing that the other guys have changed. So even if he catches 36 passes this year, as a wide receiver three, that's as good as almost every other tight end or some of the other top 10, 15 tight ends in the country, right? So to your point, That makes him a top 25 tight end, somebody you should have on your radar. And of course, commissioners are scurrying now that they've watched this, Mike, and they're going into their leagues and changing his designation to make sure that you know, nobody finds those loopholes. You guys like always finding the loopholes in the system, man.
Well, they helped CJ Donaldson a couple years ago, right? When he had the tight end designation. I mean, and it's funny, I drafted both Donaldson, or not Donaldson, Randall and McFall in my tadpole
Yeah.
bowl
And,
lineup.
it's interesting. The way that I've always run my leagues is that once when a guy is if he's missed, if he's not designated right and he comes out on the roster, we fix it manually. That way there's nobody that skates the system. But again, lessons learned from doing this for 15, 20 years when, I was doing it too, right, in the early days, and everybody started calling me out, and I was like, okay, that's enough, right?
Yeah.
I'll go with mine. I'm going to go with Blake Shapen, quarterback of Mississippi State. Had a good start to last year. And especially if you play in a two quarterback league, I think that's a guy that you can pick up late. And if you're looking for, and I think in head to head formats, fast starts are everything, right? We've talked about on previous shows how you have to be careful sometimes with those guys from the group of five conferences if they have those tough non-conference schedules. You've got to add depth to your roster to get through the first third of the regular season. Blake Shapen could be one of those guys. Mississippi State, the schedule gets tougher as they get into SEC play. They're going to be challenged to win some games in there. But they open up at Southern Miss. They play Arizona State at home, and then they get Alcorn State and Northern Illinois before they open up SEC play. It is at home, but it is against Tennessee. I don't think those 5 games are that bad. If you're playing in a two quarterback league and you really need some good spots starting in that first part of the year, I really like Blake Shapen right there, Mike.
Yeah, he was good to start the year before he got injured. I think he scored 20 plus points in every game before the injury, or maybe all but one. But yeah, I think it's good to specify that Shapen at the start of the year, because that last portion of the schedule, I think you get like Georgia, then a bye week, which is in semifinal week, and then Ole Miss maybe in the
I
finale.
think they
Yeah,
get Ole Miss,
obviously.
Missouri, maybe, or
I-
Missouri, Ole Miss
yeah,
last two. Those aren't
yeah.
terrible, but I mean, yeah, some of
No.
those, the middle of the schedule can be a little rough.
Yeah, so you want to plan ahead, but right there at the start of the year, he could be gold for
Yep.
fantasy.
And then I'll go with my number two. This is a guy that I have listed in the guide, but I still think that he's going really late in full FBS leagues. And I'm a fan of Madson Maddox, the quarterback of Boise State, getting him really late. Look, is he going to tear up the world? Is he going to be a Heisman candidate? No. But he ran for 221 yards and scored 5 rushing touchdowns last year. Who replaces Ashton Genty's 374 rushing attempts? But more importantly, who replaces his 29 rushing touchdowns if Boise State gets that high? There's a stable of backs that could do it at Boise State right now. But who's to say, Madson Maddox isn't going to get a little bit more of a rushing, who's to say he's not going to go for 408 this year? And we know that they've got some decent wide receivers as well. I really feel that now that Genty is gone, that's a guy that you can get super late, take a shot on, and there's some really good matchups on that Boise State schedule.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this, on the side, but the early camp reports for the wide receivers is why you could be in on the Boise State quarterback even more, right? Chris Marshall, a former five-star who came over from Texas A&M a few years ago, he's starting to flash that five-star talent. I think it's all about health for him. And you bring back LaChal Caples in the slot there. Just a steady performer there, plus Matt Lauder at tight end.
Yep.
So if Marshall obviously lives up to his billing, that just helps the passing game overall.
Yep. Who you having? Who's your next one? What's your next name?
Yeah, this is a guy that I don't think I've actually drafted at all this offseason, but he just kind of stuck out when you're in the offseason, you're just kind of looking at teams and reviewing your projections. And Zylon Perry at Louisiana, I updated the roster on my end for Louisiana, and they lost two of their depth pieces, probably, just, moved on in the transfer portal or what have you, but that didn't show up in the spring. So if you look at their backfield now, it is Bill Davis, Zylon Perry, and then a couple of freshmen and a redshirt freshman who don't have collegiate carries in college, obviously. So I think the running game is legitimately going to be just Perry and Bill Davis this year. We
Yep.
know that Louisiana likes a split, but that last couple of years they've had 460 plus carries, so they are a run, typically a run heavy team there. So, we like to talk about this with Penn State and kind of Notre Dame, like if Bill Davis goes down, like Zylon Perry's going to have that backfield. But even so, he's going to get double digit carries probably every single week there. If you look at some of his advanced metrics, they're all better than Bill Davis on Pro Football Focus. And, aside is you read Phil Steele's magazine. Who does he have listed as a starter? Zylon Perry. Who does he have listed as a second team Sunbelt performer? Zylon Perry. So just a guy that he's really not going in 30-round drafts. Throw a selection on him in the 29th or 30th round, and you could reap the benefits from that.
Yeah, I like that name. The proven depth is, well, there is none behind those two, right? Draylon Washington, I think, transferred over to Alabama.
Yep.
Since Napier was at Louisiana Lafayette, they've kind of been a dual back system, to your point, more run heavy than they are in the passing game, at least from fantasy assets. You're going to invest more so there at the running back and tight end than you are at wide receivers. And Louisiana's going to be, one of the top teams in the Sun Belt this year. So you figure they're going to be playing ahead in most matchups too. And of course, that could favor an extra 3, 4, 5 carries a game, right? So I really like that one. Who's the next name you have up after Perry?
Yeah, I think you're going to cover a player from this team as well, but we're going to go to Illinois, and this is a guy I drafted in this Thor Nystrom 60 teamer is Colin Dixon from Illinois. This entire offseason, everybody has been on Hudson Clement, including us, right? And then people kind of go in different directions for the wide receiver two there, right? Maybe it's Malik Elzy who came over last year. Maybe it's Justin Bowick who comes over from Ball State. But Colin Dixon really hasn't been mentioned at all. And he had a pretty productive year last year. He caught 18 passes on 25 targets. And you're just kind of reading the offseason reports. And, Brett Bielema called him an A1 type receiver for them. I don't know if he's referring to the steak sauce A1, but he's legitimately talking him up. And I sent this screenshot to you. 24/7, the Illinois page had a list of who they project to be the Illinois starters, and they put a percentage next to them. They had 100% next to Colin Dixon. If you look at Malik Elzy, he was like 65%. Hudson Clement was 50% chance to start by the Illinois beat writers. That could change as the course of fall camp goes along, but I think this is a guy that's just not being drafted in 30-round drafts, and I think you need to, start paying attention. Last point here, this has been a really top-heavy, centralized target share at Illinois the last few years. Isaiah Williams, 2 years ago, 30% target share in the slot, which is likely where Colin Dixon starts this year, if reports are accurate. Last year with Zachary Franklin and, what's his name?
Pat Bryant.
Pat Bryant, yeah, they had 55% of the target share there. So it really just goes to one or two guys the last few years. So if Dixon is that wide receiver one, he's a steal at this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, Elzy was a guy that I liked it last year, if you remember that. And Franklin, they bring him in, and then it was him and Bryant, and then they bring Clement in. Elzy's still there, and to your point, we've got somebody else that's kind of that people have taken notice in camp. And to some, believing that you might as well go ahead and pencil him as a starter. And that'll lead me into my next player, because it's kind of like a 1-2. I don't really have one in particular, but I don't know if Kaden Fegan and Aiden Lafferty are getting enough attention in drafts. And I think the reason why they're not is because we just don't know where the coin's going to land, right? Is it going to be a 50-50 split? Will we get a bell cow? We're not sure. The only thing that I do know, Mike, is I look at the Illinois schedule, and it's not that challenging at all. I mean, I wish I had it. Let me see if I have it here. Yeah, I have it here in front of me. Western Illinois, Duke, Western Michigan. Road game at Indiana. USC at home, at Purdue, Ohio State at home, okay? Then they're off. At Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern. I don't really think that that's a very tough schedule. I think Illinois is going to win some games. They're ranked. We're sitting here talking about they've got some receivers. They've got some depth at running back. I think Illinois is going to be pretty good. I don't want to look back at the end of the year and say, man, the tea leaves were there. It looks like they were going to be pretty good. The schedule was really set up. We know the system. Why didn't we jump on Fegan or Lafferty a little bit earlier than we did in our drafts?
Yeah, I think it speaks to the point that these guys are just going so late that you might as well just take a shot on them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so what I'll do is I'll lead into my next one, and that's another running back. I've got Kai Robichaux at Boston College, and
Oh, he graduated.
I'm sorry, not
Sir.
Turbo Richard. Turbo Richard. I was using Robichaux as the comp. Boy, thank goodness you caught me on that because man, I would have hated to do 5 minutes on that.
I think he just got cut by my Detroit Lions.
So anyway, I do like Turbo Richard this year. I wouldn't necessarily call him a deep sleeper, but he's going after those first and second, maybe even third tier running backs in most drafts. Last year, Kai Robichaux had 175 carries in that Boston College offense. He had double-digit touchdowns. He only had 9 receptions, but Trayshawn Ward was there as well. He caught 15 passes. The question is does Richard really take a stranglehold of that RB1 spot? And can he combine what Robichaux did on the ground last year and combine maybe what Trayshawn Ward did out of the backfield as a receiver? And if so, there's some really good value there in that Boston College offense. And I mentioned this on a couple of shows already, particularly when I was doing the schedule analysis show with the ACC. The ACC to me just doesn't have any dominant defenses in it this year. I mean, look, you've got Clemson, you're going to face every once in a while, SMU maybe, but I just feel like the ACC could be a little underrated of where we might find some fantasy potential this year. And I like Richard in that offense this year if he's going to be quote unquote the guy.
Yeah, there's not a lot of, like system data that we can go off of there, but I know they rode Kai Robichaux really hard down the stretch. He was getting 20 plus in, the last 2 or 3 games there. So maybe that continues with Turbo Richard, into this season.
Yeah, who you got next?
Yeah, Brilen Braxton. I'm actually not sure where you stand on him, but he's just a guy that I've been drafting just because of where he goes. He's QB 46, or right around that range in ADP. And I just completed a 30 round best ball on Sunday, and I got him in round 20. And I just think that's a little too low for somebody that, could potentially rush for 500 yards and 6 to 7 touchdowns this year. I want to play a little game with you. Brilen Braxton, who would you take in this scenario? These are quarterbacks that went ahead of Brilen Braxton. Would you take Braxton or Julian Sayin?
I would take saying right now. Even
Sayin
though
right
we
now.
know he's locked into a quarterback battle, right? And there's
Yeah.
nothing. I'm still going to take saying right now.
Yeah, that one's a bit of a toss-up. I can see both ways. Braxton or Nico Marchiol?
Oh, I'd take Braxton right now.
Yeah, right. That's another
I know
bad.
he's locked into the starting job.
Yep. DJ Lagway.
I'd take Braxton.
Yeah. Ethan Vasco.
You know I like Vasco. If
I do like
if he wins
Vasco
the
too.
job, I right now I'm taking. I would rather take a gamble on Vasco, but I know where you're going with this from a value standpoint. Braxton, I think, offers the security at the price in which he's going right now better
Yeah.
than Vasco.
I like Vasco too. He went 3 rounds ahead of Braxton, and that's apparently a 2 to 3 way quarterback battle
Yep.
still in
Yep.
camp right now. Kaden Salter.
I'm not. I'm not. That's. Hmm. With where they're going, I'm taking Braxton.
Yeah. Darian Mensa.
Braxton.
And then Dwayne Coleman, Army.
Depends what quarterback I'm looking to draft here. Coleman, I think, has higher upside, but I think he has a way lower floor. So from that
Yeah.
standpoint, Braxton.
Yeah, just a kind of a game there,
Yeah.
just to see like these guys are guys that just got drafted ahead of Brilen Braxton, and I half of them are locked into a QB competition currently through fall camp, a week or so. So I don't know. It's a proven playmaker. He scored 24 fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 games last year, and we're used to like Blake Anderson, the new offensive coordinator for Southern Miss. Like he's got they're chucking the ball around. They're always got a legitimate like wide receiver one or wide receiver two
Yeah.
there, dating back to Arkansas State. But man, do you remember like what was it, 2019, 16, 7, 2018, something like that, where Justice Hanson, that Oklahoma transfer, like he
Yep.
was throwing for 3,000 yards plus. He rushed for 13 combined touchdowns in 2 years as a starter. I think like over 400 yards in each of those seasons. So he's used to working with a dual threat quarterback. So I just like the certainty that Braxton provides as the locked in QB1 for a team that we think is going to be pretty good there at Southern Miss this year.
There's two things that give me hesitation on Braxton. One more legitimate than the other. One, I don't like that it's at a new program and it's starting over, even though he's under Huff, right? It's just a transition, new environment,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So that's one thing that has me a little uncertain. And two, and if I'm being completely honest with you, I just cannot get out of my head how terrible he was when he was at Tulsa.
Yep.
That just really like it makes me like, man, if I wind up drafting that guy,
Yeah.
he'll be off my roster after 2 weeks. I think he threw more interceptions than completions after the first two games when he was at Tulsa. You remember that start he had? It was terrible, man.
Because everybody was so high on him coming into that year. But I think he had like a 19-2 touchdown to interception ratio last year, something
Yeah.
like that. So it was pretty good. But either way, like
But he's got the dual threat ability.
yes,
And go ahead and name me right now off the top of your head the next best playmaker in that offense.
you can't. And they
There you
got
go.
3 to 4 running backs that they could use and 7 to 8 wide receivers
Yep.
at this point.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead. Throw out one more. Throw out your last one here for the show.
Yeah, this one is a guy that I again have not drafted at all this year. But just kind of the fall camp like news, fall camp vibe. DeShawn Bishop out of Tennessee. I just am starting to get the sense that that passing game is just going to be an abomination. Like they're in a quarterback battle. Joey Aguilar's not locked into the starting
Right.
job. You talk about the receivers like Chris Brazell still injured, Brandon Staley injured, Mike Matthews I think is back at practice now, but he was injured. Miles Kitselman, the starting tight end, red jersey, non-contact, and then behind those top three receivers who are already injured are like true freshmen. So you got major quarterback questions. You have major wide receiver questions. You got injury questions at tight end. Like, we're not expecting Dylan Sampson type numbers here, but this is also a system that's produced 1,000 yard rushers in the last decade. So
Yep.
I'm kind of leaning into DeShawn Bishop. I'm not prioritizing him because I think it's going to be somewhat split up. That's typically what Josh Heupel has done outside of Dylan Sampson.
Yep.
But if he's falling to like the 15th, 16th rounds, like that's a point where I'm going to scoop him up because I just think their best chance on offense is to run the football.
Yeah, and to that point, Tennessee, I just checked it up while you were saying it. 5 of the last 7 seasons, 2 running backs over 100 rush attempts on the season. And 6 of the last 7 seasons, 2 players at least 100 rush attempts, and one of them knows what was his quarterback. So, to your point, last year was more of the anomaly, right?
Yep.
And if we're looking at a dual back system, maybe it fits a little bit more to what I was saying with Illinois too, right? Like maybe it's a two-back system, maybe it's not. I mean, history tells us it probably will be, but who knows? What if, right? And what if he emerges as a guy that winds up getting more work due to injury?
Yeah, because we're not worried about Star Thomas at all. Like
Right.
he might be fourth string. The only reason he succeeded at Duke was just pure volume. He's not a
Yeah.
good running back. And then his Deshaun Bishop's primary competition, Peyton Lewis, I saw was running with the third string in the last report, like Tennessee report that I
Yeah.
read. So who knows? Maybe they lean into Deshaun Bishop a little bit more this season.
Yep, I like it. And throw out the last one that I have here. This was something that we've spoken about when we're talking about Texas State. I remember telling you we found some information where GJ Kinney was like, man, Bo Sparks, Walter Don, those guys should be 1,000 yard receivers this year. And then we start talking about, well, is Brad Jackson going to be the quarterback? And if so, what's that going to do to the passing game? You look up the Kinney's past. He's done it where he's had a quarterback that has run and still had some very productive receivers. And then not long ago, we found that article where, Sparks seems to be doing what we thought he was going to do. He's kind of this multifaceted player. He's returning punts, kind of a playmaker in the offense. And I just feel like that guy has the ability to make plays, and in that offense, which can be very up tempo and high powered at times. Um, I'm wondering if I have enough fantasy stock of Bo Sparks, and he seems to be hanging around a lot later in drafts than what I originally thought he was going to be. And maybe, who knows, maybe that's a guy that builds up a little bit momentum and starts going a little bit higher as we get reports in from preseason camp. But that's the thought with a lot of these names that we're throwing out there right now. Like, their value today may not be their value in another week and a half from now as we get reports, right? And for me, before we start hearing some reports, I think Bo Sparks for me right now is a guy that I wish I had a little bit more stock in right now.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. People keep drafting Brad Jackson too in all CFF formats, Dynasty and Best Balls too currently today. So I haven't seen any firm reports. I could be missing some, but if it seems like Brad Jackson still has that lead there with Texas State based on people drafting him still.
Absolutely. Anything we want to touch on before we get out of here, man?
No, I was just gonna say, sign up to the CFF site. We are posting news, notes, everything into the CFF site Discord, trying to get any news blurbs that we can on every single team in college football. So make sure to sign up and don't miss out.
Great point. The last week, I think we've done 3 updates to projections, the depth charts, and the fantasy preseason draft guide, which is something that we're updating that stuff all the time, and it's only going to get more furious as we get another couple of weeks in the preseason camp. And truth be told, I haven't even told this to you, I've started working on week 0 player projections already. So a lot going on over at the CFF site. The CFF site, a lot of drafts are just heating up. We're now here in August. 3 weeks before the season starts?
Two for week 0.
2 for week 0, 3 before week 1. But that's going to do it for this show. Come in, get an All-American membership, get a Heisman membership, get in that Discord. Man, that thing's buzzing all day long. I'll keep checking. We've got people posting player updates all day long from every program around the country. But as we continue the preseason preview series, hopefully Mike and I have a couple of more of these in us. This is going to do it for Sleepers 2.0. We'll see you guys on the next show.